They were supposed to be monks, holy men devoted to poverty and prayer. Yet within 2 centuries, the Knights Templar controlled more wealth than entire kingdoms. They owned castles, they commanded armies, they answered to no king. And then, in a single night, in just one night, they simply vanished. Their order was dissolved, their leaders were arrested, their assets seized, their secrets burned. How does an organization that powerful disappear without a trace? How does the medieval world's most invincible force fall in less than 24 hours? How did 9 knights in the 12th century become the bankers of Europe? How did they rise from protecting pilgrims to ruling markets? And what secrets were so dangerous that a king, a crowned, anointed king, would destroy them all, defy the Pope himself, just to keep those secrets hidden? This is the story of power, real power. Not the kind you see on a throne or in a parliament. The power that moves gold, the power that moves information, the power that moves empires. This is the story of the Knights Templar, and how they learned, too late, that nothing lasts forever. Let's go back to 1096. Pope Urban II stands in the Cathedral of Clermont in France. He raises his voice. He calls for holy war. Reclaim Jerusalem from the Muslims. Retake the Holy Land. This is God's work, he says. Thousands of warriors answer the call. Christian knights pour into the Mediterranean. They board ships. They land on foreign shores. They march across deserts and mountains toward Jerusalem. But here's the problem. They're not organized. They're violent, disorganized, brutal. And the pilgrims who follow them? The pilgrims who pay good money to visit holy sites. They're being slaughtered. Thieves rob them on the roads. Bandits ambush their caravans. Soldiers kill them. Disease kills them. They arrive at pilgrimage sites, if they arrive alive, broken and traumatized. The Crusades' spiritual mission is failing not because of military defeat, but because the pilgrims cannot survive the journey. So, in 1119, a French knight named Hugues de Payens realizes something. If you want to save the Crusades, you have to protect the pilgrims. He gathers 8 other knights, 9 men total. They take 3 vows: poverty, chastity, obedience. They name themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. In English, we call them the Knights Templar. And their mission? Protect the pilgrims, guard the roads, secure the passages to Jerusalem, make the journey safe. But Hugues understood something crucial. Geography is destiny. The Levant, the lands of the Eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, was the crossroads of 3 continents: Europe, Asia, Africa. Everyone who wanted to trade, to travel, to make war, they had to pass through Templar lands. Control that geography, and you control information. You control money. You control power. Here's where it gets brilliant. A wealthy pilgrim from London wanted to visit Jerusalem, but he couldn't carry thousands of pounds of gold through bandit-infested roads. It would be stolen. He would be killed. So he went to a Templar house in London. He deposited his gold. He received a letter of credit, written in cipher, signed with a seal only other Templars could verify. He traveled to the Holy Land with only a piece of paper. In Jerusalem, he walked into a Templar house, presented his letter, and withdrew his money in local coin. No gold had moved. No caravan had been robbed. No pilgrim had been murdered. Only information had traveled, and the Templars controlled that information. This was the medieval world's first international banking system. For the first time in human history, you could move wealth across continents without moving gold. And only one organization controlled this system: the Knights Templar. Kings needed them to finance wars. Merchants needed them to move money safely. The Pope needed them to support the Crusades. They had made themselves indispensable. Now, the Templars weren't just bankers. They were warriors. Disciplined warriors. While other Crusader armies relied on individual bravery, on knights charging recklessly at enemies, the Templars fought like a machine. They had standardized tactics, set formations, cavalry charges trained to precision, defense positions calculated and rehearsed. When a knight joined the Templars, he didn't become an individual hero. He became part of a system, part of an organism. In 1177, at a place called Montgisard, they proved it. Baldwin IV was the leper king of Jerusalem. Literally, leprous. His body was rotting away from disease. He rode into battle with just 500 knights. 500 against Saladin's army of 12,000. 12,000 against 500. And the Templars charged. They broke through the Muslim lines. They routed the army. Saladin himself barely escaped with his life. 500 defeated 12,000. This wasn't luck. This was discipline. This was tactics. This was organization. But military power alone doesn't build an empire. The Templars understood something deeper. You control the world through interdependence. Make a king dependent on you. Make him owe you money. Make him unable to wage war without your support. And now you control him. King Philip of France owed the Templars millions. He couldn't repay the debt. He couldn't even tax them. Templar lands belonged to the church, exempt from royal taxation. Philip was a king in name only. In reality, he was a debtor to an organization he couldn't control. But then came 1187, the Horns of Hattin. Saladin had learned from Montgisard. He wouldn't fight the Templars in direct battle. Instead, he lured them into the desert. He cut off their water supply. He surrounded them on a rocky mountain near the Sea of Galilee. The Templars charged, again and again. But they were surrounded, thirsty, exhausted. By sunset, they had lost. For the first time in 80 years of crusading, the Templars had been decisively defeated. But here's what separates great organizations from those that merely fail. They adapt. The Templars realized they couldn't maintain military dominance forever. Too many enemies, too much change. The world was evolving. So they doubled down on their real source of power: finance. They moved their headquarters from the Levant to Cyprus, from a war zone to a fortress in the Mediterranean. And they became something new. Not warriors, bankers. By 1200, Templar houses existed from Scotland to Egypt, in every major city, in every major port. They loaned money to kings. They managed estates worth millions. They controlled the pilgrim routes, the trade routes, the intelligence networks. Their wealth grew geometrically. By 1250, a single Templar house in Paris controlled more gold than the entire French royal treasury. The King of France was literally poorer than a religious order. Let that sink in. The most powerful monarch in Western Europe was financially weaker than an organization that wasn't supposed to possess anything. And it wasn't just about gold. It was about information. The Templars maintained networks of spies across 3 continents. They knew what kings were planning before kings knew themselves. They knew which merchant ships carried valuable cargo. They knew which routes were safe and which were death traps. Information is power, and the Templars controlled it. A merchant wanted to know if the route through North Africa was safe? He'd ask a Templar. A king wanted to know about enemy movements? He'd ask a Templar. The Templars had become the intelligence agency of the medieval world. Here's what made them truly powerful. They answered only to the Pope. Not to the kings who hosted them. Not to the local nobles. Not to any secular authority. If a king wanted to arrest a Templar, he couldn't. The Pope would protest. If a king wanted to tax them, he couldn't. They belonged to the church. They were, in effect, above the law. outside the normal chain of authority, and kings hated them for it. By 1300, the Knights Templar were at their absolute peak. 43 Templar houses, thousands of knights, millions in gold and silver, land holdings across Europe and the Middle East, political influence with popes and kings. They were the most powerful non-governmental organization the medieval world had ever seen. They had no idea it was all about to end. Success is a dangerous thing. The more powerful you become, the more enemies you make. And the Templars had made powerful enemies. King Philip IV of France was drowning in debt. He owed the Templars fortunes. He couldn't repay them. He couldn't even negotiate with them. They answered only to Rome, not to him. Every year the debt grew. Every year Philip's humiliation deepened. A king is supposed to be powerful, almighty, the representative of God on earth. But Philip was weak. He was beholden to monks, to bankers, to an organization he couldn't control. Then the whispers started. At first, just rumors, accusations, things that seemed impossible, but what if they were true? The Templars worshipped an idol, a demonic head called Baphomet. They spat on the cross. They denied Christ. They practiced satanic rituals in secret. Were these accusations true? Almost certainly not. But truth doesn't matter in geopolitics. Perception does. And Philip understood how to control perception. Philip was patient. He secretly consulted with Pope Clement V. The details are murky. Some say Philip manipulated the Pope. Some say Clement agreed willingly. But the result was clear. Rome would not defend the Templars. The Pope's protection, their ultimate shield, would be lowered. Philip then gathered evidence. He tortured prisoners, extracted confessions, built a case. He had chosen his moment perfectly. The Templars were vulnerable. The Pope was wavering. And the world was ready to believe the worst. October 13, 1307. A date that would echo through history as Friday the 13th. At dawn, soldiers appeared at every Templar house in France. Dozens of houses. Simultaneous raids. Knights were arrested in their homes. Their assets were seized. Their records were confiscated. Grand Master Jacques de Molay, was arrested in his own headquarters in Paris. In a single morning, the most powerful organization in Europe was decapitated. What followed was systematic psychological destruction. The imprisoned knights were tortured. Not to death, that would have been too quick. But enough to break them. Enough to make them confess to anything. Under torture, many Templars admitted to denying Christ, to spitting on the cross, to worshipping demons. Of course they did. You can make anyone confess to anything under torture. This is true now. It was true then. But the confessions served their purpose. They provided evidence. They fed the narrative. The Templars weren't just powerful. They were heretics, Satanists, traitors to Christendom. Preachers gave sermons in cathedrals across Europe. Broadsheets spread the accusations. The public began to believe. The Templars, once seen as holy warriors protecting pilgrims, were now seen as demons. The trials were theatrical, designed for public consumption, designed to break the Templars' reputation so thoroughly that no one would rise to their defense. It worked. On March 18, 1314, Grand Master Jacques de Molay was led to a stake on an island in the Seine River in Paris. The wood was arranged. The flames were lit. As the fire rose around him, witnesses reported that Jacques de Molay made a final statement. A curse. He cursed King Philip to meet him before God's judgment within a year. He cursed Pope Clement to meet him before God's judgment within a year. Both of them. Summoned to divine judgment within 12 months. Were the deaths of Philip and Clement divine punishment? Or just coincidence? Philip IV died in November 1314, just 8 months after de Molay's execution. He was 46 years old. Pope Clement V died in April 1316, just 13 months later. He was only 60. Both died suddenly, both unexpectedly, both within the time frame de Molay had predicted. Medieval people believed in curses. The curse of Jacques de Molay became legend. It became proof in their minds that God had punished the persecutors. Whether it was divine or coincidence, the narrative was set. The Templars were avenged. But by then, the Knights Templar were already officially dissolved. At the Council of Vienne in 1312, the Pope issued a papal bull. The order was abolished. All Templar properties were transferred to another military order, the Knights Hospitalier. On paper, the Templars ceased to exist. They had been written out of history. But erasure from history and disappearance from reality are two different things. The Templars didn't vanish. They transformed. Their banking systems became the foundation of modern international finance. The letter of credit they invented is still used today, now in digital form, but the principle is identical. Their architectural knowledge lived on in the fortresses they built, still standing across Europe and the Middle East. Their legacy of organized, disciplined command became the model for modern military structures and intelligence agencies. And their mystery became immortal. They became legends, myths, stories whispered for centuries about a secret society that knew hidden truths. This story isn't just history. It's playing out again right now. Look at the world today. We have organizations, tech companies, financial institutions, intelligence agencies that operate in shadows, that governments depend on, that governments can't fully control. Google knows more about your thoughts than you do. Banks move more money in one day than kingdoms moved in a year. Intelligence agencies operate with minimal oversight, protected by classified laws. The pattern repeats. Power concentrates, interdependence deepens, resentment builds. And then, when the moment is right, those in political power move to reclaim control. The Templars learned this too late. Will we? The Knights Templar rose from nothing. They became untouchable. They controlled empires from the shadows. And then they fell. Completely, totally, within a single generation. Power is never permanent. Nothing lasts forever. The greatest empires eventually crumble. The question is, do you adapt before it's too late? Or do you wait until the fire is lit? If you want to continue deciphering the mysteries of power with us, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.